Okay, today we're going to discuss behaviors and attitudes, how behaviors can influence attitudes, how attitudes can influence behaviors. And to do that, we're going to use the research done by Festinger and Carl Smith from the 60s. It's entitled Cognitive Consequences of Forced Compliance. So, their basic research question to start with was what happens to a person's private opinion, in this case their attitude, if he is forced to do or say something contrary to that opinion. So here we're seeing, how does that behavior then influence that attitude? And to start with, they dug around in the research to find what had been done in this area, and they came up with two hypotheses based on their searches. And the first one was that basically our opinions or our attitudes that we hold will change under certain circumstances to come more in line with our behavior. Okay, and they additionally found that originally the idea was that the larger the reward, the easier it would be for us to change our attitudes to match our behaviors, but they actually found that that was the opposite. You need a smaller reward to better influence attitude change. So for their study, this was their hypothesis, quoting from their article. The prediction is that the larger the reward given to the subject, the smaller will be the subsequent opinion change. So basically, the smaller the reward, the bigger the change we'll see. So to test that, they actually conducted an experiment. And this experiment, back in the 60s, I guess, at Stanford, introductory psychology students were required to participate in so many hours of research. So they were able to get 71 students to participate. They posted about their research, and basically what that said was that they had a 2-hour experiment dealing with measures of performance. So 71 males volunteered, and they ended up putting them into 3 different groups, and we'll talk about those 3 groups here in just a minute. But basically this was the procedure. All the groups experienced this same thing, and then we'll talk about how it was different between the groups. First off, they'd show up and just wait for a little bit in the secretary's office. Then the experimenter would come in, introduce himself, and then show them the room and start to introduce the tasks that they would be doing during the experiment. Basically, they had 2 tasks to do, 30 minutes for each one. The first task was dealt with these spools in this tray. And basically, according to the researchers, the task was to put 12 spools onto a tray and then empty the tray, then refill it with the spools, and so on, over and over again. Okay, and the second task, the second 30 minutes, dealt with pegs. They had these square pegs in this big board, 48 square pegs, and they were called upon to turn each peg a quarter turn clockwise. So they did all of those. Then they'd go back and turn it another quarter turn, and so on, over and over. Here's an image of the you can see, not real well, but there you can see the board in the picture there. So basically they were trying to set up these really boring and dull tasks for these participants to engage in. Okay, so here's how they actually made it different. For the groups. The control group, after they finished participating, doing these tasks, they were taken back to the secretary's office and they waited there for 4 minutes. The other 2 groups, basically what they told them was, we have another participant waiting to do these same tasks, but that participant actually is in a different group where we want the expectation of fun and enjoyment to come with them when they come in to do these tasks, so we can see if there's any difference in performance. So, can we pay you to go in there and tell that next participant that this was a fun, engaging, enjoyable task? One group, they said, can we pay you, will you accept $1 to go in there and tell this participant that? And the other group, they said, will you accept $20, go in there and tell that participant that? Then after all 3 groups were done with that, then it goes back and they have the same experience where now they're kind of interviewed post-experiment to find out how they would rate the enjoyableness of that task. Then they used a -5 to +5 scale. -5 was extremely dull, and +5 was extremely enjoyable. And here we can see the results of their experiment. Here are the three groups, and you can see that the control group, their average rating on that scale was a -0.45, so just barely below the 0 range, which would have been really not dull or enjoyable, just kind of in the middle. The $1 group, their average rating was 1.35, so a bit above that 0 mark. And the $20 group was, again, right about the 0 mark. And the researchers report that these differences are statistically significant. So the difference between the control group and the $1 group is a statistically significant difference, and the difference between the $1 group and the $20 group is also a statistically significant difference. So we can see that that smaller external reward in that case ended up changing their behavior more, or their attitude, excuse me, changed their attitude more about that overall task enjoyment, I guess. So what I think about this, first off, I think it's awesome. It was an experiment, and I really love experiments, and I think they did a good job of making the three groups different and using that control group to kind of give them a baseline measure of the group's enjoyment of the task. The only thing that I think maybe could be done to improve upon their methodology would be maybe somewhere in there to fit in a measure of the task enjoyment before the behavior. So maybe have them do the task and somehow get out of them, how much they enjoyed that task. Then have them, tell that participant that, oh, it was such an enjoyable task, and then have them do that kind of post-experiment rating scale. And I think that would just, give you a little bit better idea for each individual what they thought and then how that behavior changed their attitudes. So there you have it. Small rewards are more likely to change our attitudes than big ones.